Good morning. My name is Samuel Olivares,
I'm Michaela Reyes.
and we're both from Lone Star College. We're both Lone Star College-Tomball students. Welcome to our annual Constitution Day program organized by the LSC Tomball Center for Civic Engagement and Social Sciences Department.
Our classmates in Government 2305 are hosting the program this year. You saw them at the door as ushers while some were roaming the campus, encouraging others to attend. In a moment, you will hear a small group play our national anthem, and afterwards, 2 of our nation's veterans will give a short talk on Constitution Day. At the end of the program, my classmates are ready to ask questions, and finally, there's a dedicated group who will serve some Constitution Day sweets.
We want to thank the Houston Endowment for sponsoring this event, the College Relations and Facilities Departments for help with promo and logistics, as well as Houston Voting Initiative for their help with voter registration. If you are not registered to vote, please visit the Houston Voting Initiative's table in the hallway to complete your registration. The deadline to register to vote in this year's elections is October 7th. Even if you are already registered, check your registration status by going to www.votetexas.gov. Are there any LSC Tomball administrators, staff, or faculty present? If so, please stand so we may recognize you at this time. Thank you for attending.
Next, we will hear our national anthem. Thank you. Constitution Day is a federally mandated program. Public Law 108-447 states each educational institution that receives federal funds for a fiscal year shall hold an educational program on the United States Constitution. Here to tell us more about it is 2 of our country's finest, Megan Ortega and Justin Kiefer, who are veterans of the armed forces.
I'm Megan Ortega.
I'm Justin Kiefer.
And today we celebrate Constitution Day, a federal observance recognizing the adoption of the United States Constitution and the significance of American citizenship. On September 17, 1787, 39 delegates came together at the Constitution Convention in Philadelphia to sign a document that would become the foundation of our government.
Through efforts by individuals like William Randolph Hearst and Olga T. Weber, this day evolved into Citizenship Day, officially recognized in 2004 thanks to Louise Lee and Senator Robert Byrd. Constitution Day is not just a celebration of a historical document, it is a recognition of our shared heritage as citizens of a free nation. It serves several important purposes.
Firstly, to commemorate the Constitution. We celebrate the creation of our laws and government, which is the bedrock of our democracy. This day also reminds us of the privileges and responsibilities of citizenship, whether by birth or naturalization. It is a day for us to reflect on the importance of understanding how our government works and the rights and duties we all share as citizens.
Over the centuries, the Constitution has evolved to meet the challenges of an ever-changing society while maintaining the most important concepts of liberty and justice. We also remember the sacrifices made by our founders to secure the freedoms we enjoy today. I can relate to this statement as I have just completed 6 years of service in the United States Army. Thank you. The idea of personal sacrifice for the sake of service is something I hold dear to my heart. The idea of belonging to something greater than yourself, for the betterment of not only for yourself, but for your nation, is an idea that's propelled me to where I am today. I'm currently pursuing a degree in nursing. I've been afforded the opportunity to do this from the virtues of not only the Declaration of Independence stands for, but what the Constitution facilitates, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Like many Americans after September 11th, 2001, I raised my right hand and took the oath of enlistment with the United States Army. The first line of the oath is a powerful reminder. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Over my 22-year career, I have seen the world and know firsthand that while our country is far from perfect, the liberties, freedoms, and securities we enjoy are unmatched. Let us never take our freedoms for granted, neglect to exercise our rights, or forget the significance of the Constitution and its role in shaping this great nation.
As we celebrate Constitution Day, let us not only remember the document that defines our government, but also reflect on what it means to be an American, committed to the values of democracy and freedom.
Thank you for the information you provided and for your service to our country. Now, our keynote speaker, Mr. Chris Hollins. To introduce him, we invite LSC Tomball Professor Emerita Dr. Annie Johnson Benefield to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited that Chris is here. And we'll try not to be as informal in terms of doing that. Chris Hollins is now the city controller. He holds a bachelor's, I'm going to start with the beginning part. He has a bachelor's degree of arts with Phi Beta Theta Kappa honors from Morehouse College, which is a historically Black college and university in Atlanta, Georgia. He completed a Juris Doctorate with Yale Law School and Harvard Business School, both getting his Juris Doctorate and his Master's of Business Administration. He worked in the private sector in terms of evaluating and looking at government programs in terms of developing efficiency with McKinsey and Company. He also practiced law, but as a pinch hitter, he came in doing and served as the clerk, the Harris County clerk, doing a pivotal time in history in Harris County during COVID. And he came in and he used those efficiencies he learned in terms of government operations when he was at McKinsey and Company and instituted some breathtaking innovation in terms of how people vote. And some of those things included drive-through voting, 24-hour voting, online mail balloting tracking, and he tripled the number of early voting centers in Harris County. For the first time, they had a record number of early voting centers for people to actually vote. And we had a record number of people who turned out and vote during that election cycle. Now he has gone on and he was elected in 2023, and now he's the city controller since January of 2014. He was independently elected to oversee and have oversight over the city budget, over their debt portfolio, and over oversight to make sure that the money that the taxpayers actually pay are efficiently and effectively spent across. So he's the person in charge of fiscal responsibility and result-driven operation. He used his office auditing authority to bring new ideas and best practices to city departments that result in cost savings and higher standards of service to Houston residents. So I'm proud and very pleased to welcome City Comptroller Chris Hollins to the stage.
Good morning, y'all. Can y'all hear me on this? Yeah. Wonderful. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. Again, my name is Chris Hollins, and I have the honor and the privilege of serving as Houston City Controller. As Dr. Benefield mentioned, that makes me the taxpayer watchdog. It's my job to make sure that the investment that folks are making in the city of Houston through their tax payments is paying a dividend back into their lives and into their communities. That means cracking down on waste, fraud, and abuse. That means looking for opportunities to be more efficient and effective with the way that we use tax dollars to provide critical services. That includes services like public safety, public health, libraries, parks, repairing roads, bridges, making sure that clean water flows through those pipes and into your home or to your apartment every single day without worry. And so we take that job very seriously. Before I dive in, I want to again thank Dr. Benefield for not only the warm introduction, but for her service. You may or may not know this, but she previously served as president of Houston's League of Women Voters, one of the most inspiring and effective nonpartisan voting organizations that make sure that Houston area voters, have access to information about their registration, about where to vote, about the candidates and their positions, so that you can make an informed decision about your future, about our city and our state and our country's future. I also want to again thank our veterans here today. Megan and Justin, your service is inspiring. I'm going to talk a lot about what it means today to have the right to vote in this country. But that right and so many other rights are protected by you all risking your lives on foreign battlefields to protect this nation and our flag. And so we thank you very much. Can we give them another round of applause? And to Samuel and Michaela, I don't know where you all went off to, but thank y'all for emceeing the program today. Y'all are doing an incredible job. You know, when Dr. Benefield reached out to me about this morning, she asked me to talk about voting and about the upcoming election. And look, I firmly believe that this country that we live in, the United States of America, it's the greatest country in the world, but it's not perfect. It's never been perfect. And what our founders sought to do over the course of time, with our help, is to form a more perfect union. The Constitution that our veterans talked about is the exact same. It's a living document. It's one that has helped us to preserve and protect the rights that we hold in American democracy, but it's not perfect. In fact, it's been amended dozens of times, and we still hold the right to amend it today to make it better. And it's our job as individuals to play a significant role in this system. And one of the biggest ways that we can do that is voting. And one of the ways that the Constitution helps us is by preserving our right to vote. And so here's what I want to say. This key freedom that we have as Americans, if we look across the globe, there are many places in the world that today still do not have this right. What makes America so special is that it's the longest lasting democracy in human history. Other democracies have tried and failed, but this nation has preserved. And as you look at the news today, if you look at what's happening around us, what we can see is that our future as a democratic nation is not guaranteed. We have to be the ones that protect and preserve it. And the way that we do that, there are so many ways to do it, but a significant way that we do that is that we use our voice to put elected officials into office to represent our interests and our rights. And that helps us to be self-determined as a community, as a city, as a state, and as a nation. And I also want to say, could we talk about everybody being equal in this country? We talk about everyone's voice being equal. And I just want to be honest with you. The voting booth, the ballot box, is one of your opportunities to truly be equal on one occasion. And look, again, we're in America, we're free, all that good stuff. But me, Chris Hollins, the guy, the city controller, if I say something out there, yeah, I have a quote unquote equal voice. But we all know that if Taylor Swift says something, that her voice is much bigger than mine, right? That's going to reach so many more people. And when you go to vote, you and pick a person, Taylor Swift, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, every single one of you is equal because you each have one vote and that vote counts the same. And so I want y'all to think about that. In this nation where we're striving for equality and where we still have so much more work to do, the one place where you can have your right, you can have your say, your voice can be heard is by exercising your right to vote. As Dr. Benefield shared, one of the most distinct privileges of my life was to serve as county clerk for Harris County back in 2020, which at that time was the most important election of our lifetimes. I stand before you about 4 years later, and we're now marching towards what is going to be the next most important election of our lifetimes. But going back to 2020, if you all remember, I imagine most of y'all were probably in high school in 2020, is that right? I'm sure y'all remember waking up one day and they're saying, hey, school's canceled. We're gonna sit at home, we're gonna get on Zoom, we'll do this for about 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, life is gonna return to normal. But life didn't return to normal, did it? That lockdown lasted a lot longer than we thought it was going to. Many of us had friends and family members who started to get sick. Some of us lost those friends and family members. We are all here today are fortunate to be here, and some of us are still wearing masks to protect us and to protect our immune system, to keep us healthy. And it went beyond just our physical health. You know, we were praying for our family members. I remember going and talking to my mom through a window at her home. But we were also, we were worried about our economic future. Because when we were stuck at home, we're like, well, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to keep the lights on? These are issues that your parents were most certainly concerned with. Small business owners wondering, can I keep all these people on my payroll who are doing good stuff, but right now we don't have anything for them to do. And our whole nation was dealing with that challenge. And our communities and us as individuals were dealing with that. And on top of that, we found ourselves in the most important election of our lifetimes, when democracy was truly on the line. And I became county clerk. My predecessor was a woman named Diane Troutman. She was an amazing public servant. But she was up there in age, and she had pre-existing health conditions. And the job of an election administrator was one where you had to be out in the streets, running around and interacting with a lot of people. And so she made the decision for herself that she couldn't serve in that role, and she resigned. And all of a sudden, in this most important time, Harris County, the largest county in Texas, the third largest county in the United States of America, didn't have someone who's going to make sure that this critical election happened. And I raised my hand to do that job. You heard a little bit about my biography, but what I'm sure you didn't hear in that was any experience serving as an election administrator. When I became the county clerk, I'd been involved in politics. I had worn t-shirts, I had voted, I had knocked on people's doors, encouraging them to vote. But I hadn't done the work of making sure that all of the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed in this big logistical operation that ultimately allowed our county has 5 million people. Our county has 2.5 million registered voters. And we had to make sure that every single one of them had a true opportunity to vote and to do so safely and conveniently at a time where we were truly struggling. And we took that safety piece of it very, very seriously. Because again, you might remember, I got to rewind life for you a little bit. We didn't have any kind of vaccine at that time. There were no drugs that we knew of that made us safe from COVID-19. And all we knew is that every now and then people were popping up and saying they had it. People were going to the hospital. Our hospitals were overwhelmed and people were dying. And then we were attending funerals on Zoom. It was a sad time and it was a scary time. But we had to persevere through that and make sure that people could exercise their constitutional right. And so we put together a number of initiatives. First of all, we were encouraging as many people as possible to vote from home. At the time, because of the coronavirus, 45 out of the 50 states in the United States of America said that anybody who wanted to could vote from home. You could request a mail ballot and you could exercise your right sitting there at your kitchen table and send it in and have your vote counted. Texas was not one of those 45 states. In fact, Texas remains the hardest state to vote in these United States of America. It's harder to register, and it's harder ultimately to exercise that right. And so we couldn't have everybody vote at home, but our seniors could, and people with disabilities could. And we made sure that all of them got vote by mail applications, and hundreds of thousands of our seniors voted by mail. And I truly believe to this day that tens of thousands of them are alive because we allowed them to do that. In addition, we wanted to make it convenient because at that time, again, we remember our kids weren't going to school. So especially when we're talking about young children, if moms wanted to come and vote, they had nowhere to take their young child. They couldn't drop them off at daycare. There was no place. And so we said, look, we're going to have drive-through voting. We've been driving to go get Whataburger for a long time. Now you can drive up and pick up your groceries. You can drive up to go to an ATM. You can drive up to pick up medicine at the pharmacy. We're going to make it so that you can drive up, open your window, and somebody will bring the polls to you. And you can vote in the same way that everybody else can without getting out of your car, without exposing yourself to this virus. And you can even do it with your kids or your dog sitting in the back seat. We did that, and upwards of 130,000 people used drive-through voting. Also 24-hour voting. Again, many of us work 9 to 5, and then we have a couple of hours to try to get to the polls right after work. But some people are working 2 jobs. Some people work at night and they're asleep during the day so they can recover. And particularly our shift workers, these are people who power our economy in ways that many of us don't recognize. They work at grocery stores. They're stocking shelves at 2 or 3 in the morning. They're going down to the Port of Houston working as welders or electricians. They're getting off at midnight. And even our first responders, who we do recognize, right? Those in uniform, our police, our firefighters, very often are clocking in at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and they're not getting off until 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and then they want to go home and get to bed. We created 24-hour voting so that no matter what time of day it is that you got off of work or that you got done taking care of your elderly parent or aunt or uncle or grandmother, that you could cast your vote in the same way and with the same level of convenience that anybody else could vote. We had drive-through voting, 24-hour voting. We tripled the number of early voting centers, not only so that you would be 3 times as likely to have a voting center in your neighborhood or near your place of business or near your church, your place of worship, but also for social distancing. Because again, we all had to be standing 6 feet apart with masks, et cetera, et cetera. And if you walk into a voting center today or before the pandemic, those voting centers, those polls are kind of right next to each other. You're voting here, someone else is voting here. We had to space those out. And so we had these massive gymnasiums, and even those couldn't hold the same number of voting boxes that we were accustomed to. And so we were working through all these logistical challenges and coming up with new ideas and innovative solutions to make voting work, to make it safe, to make it convenient. And ultimately, it did work. In fact, it worked so well that our governor, who doesn't like folks voting very much, particularly in diverse places like Houston, did everything that he could to shut us down. An example, At that point, I talked about those mail ballots that we allowed seniors to use. Some folks weren't so confident in putting their ballot in the mailbox. They didn't know if it would get to us. And so we offered drop-off centers where you could come and, again, either through a window if you wanted to, or you could walk in, you could hand your mail ballot to a person that worked for the county clerk's office and make sure that your vote got counted. We wanted this to be convenient, so we had 12 drop-off centers across the county. The governor didn't like that. So with the stroke of his pen, he used his emergency power, and the next day we could only have one drop-off center. And as y'all know, Harris County is huge. By population, if Harris County were a state, it would be the 26th largest state in America. And if you talk about how big it is in terms of the expansive mass of Harris County, driving from one end to the other and back can easily be upwards of 2 hours, especially in traffic. Some of that's without traffic. And so our governor, our attorney general were making it so much harder for us to vote. We were getting sued right and left by political candidates, by our own state attorney general, saying, hey, sending a vote by mail application to a senior is wrong. And it's just like, what are we talking about here? Letting people vote out of their car windows is wrong, and trying to make it illegal. And we won those lawsuits. We stood up, we fought, we did not back down, and we protected every single one of those votes. Ultimately, about 1.7 million people in Harris County were able to vote in 2020. Far and away the most people that have ever voted in any county, in any election in Texas history, and that record still stands today, and we're very proud of that. But we want even more people to vote, because I told you that there are 2.5 million registered voters in Harris County. We want all of them to vote, and right now we're looking at 68% or so as a record, right? That means 1 out of every 3 people is throwing away their right. That one time when you can be equal, when your voice means as much as everybody else's, regardless of your skin color, regardless of where your parents come from, regardless of the language you're spoken in, regardless of who you love, regardless of your education level. If you're a United States citizen, you have this one right that makes you equal to everybody else on this one occasion. And 1 out of 3 Houstonians are throwing that right away. And so we're trying to change that. That's why I'm here talking to you all today. We have to understand the privilege that we have as Americans, but also that responsibility. Because when we look at the nation that exists today, and when we look at the direction that we're headed, you look at where public education is, you look at where access to healthcare is, you look at where access to affordable housing options are. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but I would imagine that a number of you still reside with your parents because it's so expensive to go out and get an apartment in a way that it's never been so pricey before, especially in Houston or in the state of Texas. These are things that we can fight for or against, that we can change through our power as a self-determined nation and as a self-determined community. And we can embrace that right and that power by voting. And so what can we do right now? Today, we are 7 weeks away from Election Day, 49 days. And I think it was mentioned earlier, the deadline to register to vote is 30 days before Election Day. It's October 7th. We have less than 3 weeks. If you're not registered to vote, you have less than 3 weeks to register to vote. And I'll kind of touch on that really quickly. Even this deadline of having to register 30 days in advance makes no sense. Like, imagine if one of y'all walked into the Apple store and you had your money and you were ready to go and you said, I'm here for an iPhone. And they said, great, sign right here, and in 30 days you can come back to buy an iPhone. You would say, and excuse my French, that is the dumbest shit I've ever heard, right? Now we're talking about our constitutional right. None of you, if you've read the Constitution, I saw them hand them out. If you flip through it, what you won't find is the constitutional right to buy an iPhone. It's not in there, I promise you. But you can buy one like that, right? Because they make it easy, because they want you to have one. you do have a constitutional right to vote. And as an American, we should want you to vote, and we should make it as easy as possible to vote. And so we should have same-day registration. We're in 2024. We have all the access to the data, the security, the blah, 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 blah. We can confirm that you are you today if we wanted to. And in fact, many other states do. Same thing, bank account. If you went to Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Chase today, and you said, I got a bunch of money, I want to open a bank account. And they said, great, come back in 30 days after we've looked at your ID. You would say, that is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. They want you to open a bank account. They want your resources to be with them. They make it as simple and as straightforward as possible. And they want that to be secure because they don't want to be part of any kind of fraud, yada, yada, yada. They can do all that because in 2024, clearly the technology exists to verify who you are and where you come from and all those different things. We can do that with voting easily. We also do not have online voter registration in Texas. We are one of only 8 states, 42 states. You go online, again, you type in your information, social security, address, It validates who you are. It might even ask you a couple of security questions about addresses you've lived at or where you work. And then you're registered to vote. Texas does not have online voter registration. I will ask you to raise your hands on this one. How many people have a printer at their house? That's a lot more than I expected. Many of us do not, and especially if you're perhaps not a student. If you're elderly, if you don't have a lot of money, you don't just have a printer at your house. You may not even have a computer. You may do all your online stuff, on your handheld device. To say, hey, if you want to vote in Texas, you have to print this form out and either hand deliver it or mail it off somewhere. That's going to create a barrier. It's going to make it harder for people to access that right. And that's where Texas is right now. Particularly if you're young, particularly if you're poor, particularly if you're a person of color. The state does not want you to have as much access to the ballot as you should. But I'm talking to a bunch of highly intelligent individuals today who understand the importance and the power that we have in our vote. And so step one, I'm asking you to register to vote if you have not. If you say, look, I've already registered, I did it 2 years ago. Guess what? The governor just announced a couple of weeks ago that they yanked 1 million names off of the voter rolls. And so you have to confirm that you're still on there. They put another couple of million in what's called suspense. So it's like, we're not kicking you off yet, but we're gonna put you in a little timeout. You need to go and check. And within Harris County, you can go to harrisvotes.com to do that. Statewide, you can Google, Texas Secretary of State's office. But you need to confirm that you are still registered to vote and able to, and you want to clear that up before the deadline on October 7th. After you register to vote, then you got to actually do it. Make a plan to vote. Figure out what location, again, is near your home, is near your school, is near the place where you're going to go, pick up your kid or your niece or see your parents. Find a place where you're going to vote. Decide what day you're going to vote on. We have early voting, so you don't have to vote just on election day. If you're going to be out of town, if you've got to work that day, whatever, you have 2 weeks of early voting. So you can choose the day and the time and the location where you can vote. Harris County, under my leadership, made it such that you can vote at any voting location in the county. Before, you could only vote at one, and that was the one near your house. And if you live out in the suburbs and you work downtown and you're going to have to sit in, an hour and a half of traffic to get home, sorry, you might not be able to vote that day. Now we are voting at any of what's now hundreds of locations. Hundreds of locations across Harris County, and as a Harris County resident, you can vote at any single one of them. The same is true if you live in Fort Bend. I'm not sure about Montgomery. But we're trying to make it, again, as easy to exercise that right as possible, but you still have to make a plan. Know where you're going, know how you're going to get there, know what time you plan on being there, make sure it's open during those times, and then go and vote. But also inform yourselves, right? You can go to the League of Women Voters Houston website, and they make research so easy. What they do is they go to every single candidate, and they say, tell us in your own words why we should vote for you. Tell us what your priorities are. And they just print it, and you can look at it, right? So instead of having to Google like 1,000 different candidates, and Harris County has a ballot that is about 100 races long. I know some really smart, really engaged people who are going and looking at these judges, and they're like, I don't know who these people are. I don't know what they stand for. I'm guessing, right? The League of Women Voters website makes it so that you can go, and every candidate who cared to can tell you exactly what they're about and what they stand for. And again, it doesn't matter who you're going to vote for. I have my own views on that. I think you should vote for people who believe in science. I think you should vote for people who care about you and your community. I think you should vote for people who care about preserving our democracy. But you're entitled, again, to vote however you want, but you want that vote to be informed. So take a look at who your options are and know who you're voting for going in. And then vote. But don't just stop there. Now you gotta go talk to friends, family members. Because again, 1 out of 3 people are throwing that right away. So chances are, you look to your left, you look to your right, you're seeing somebody who in the past has not exercised that right to vote. Many of you, the last time we had a presidential election, were not old enough to vote, and this is your first opportunity. And what we see, fair or not, is that older people, seniors who aren't, and I love seniors, I got parents, all that good stuff. Some of them aren't going to be here 30 years from now to experience, the effects and the impact of what they're voting. You are going to be here, and so many of you are not taking it upon yourselves to shape that future that we have. And so make sure that you're talking to friends, family members, classmates, folks who you work with, coworkers, and everything I'm telling you, make sure that they're doing the same thing. Register to vote, make a plan to vote, and then actually follow through on it. And then if you want to, you can go even further. You can volunteer. You can be an election worker. You can volunteer for a campaign. You can give some of those coins in your pocket to a candidate that you really, really believe in. Or you can just stand outside of a voting center and encourage people to vote, for the candidates that most inspire you. There are so many ways to participate in this democracy. Voting and encouraging others to vote is one of the most critical, and that's what I'm asking you to do. One last point, and then I'll get out of your way here. I've talked about these laws that make it a little bit more complicated to vote. It's getting more serious than that. Just in the last couple of weeks, members of an organization called LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, many of them had their doors of their homes kicked in by state agents, with the Attorney General using his power to raid their homes with search warrants, accusing them of voter fraud. Now, if you haven't heard of LULAC, LULAC is the largest and oldest Hispanic civil rights organization in the country. It was founded in 1929, right down the road in Corpus Christi. And what they've been doing for the longest time is just making sure that people of Hispanic and Latin descent, again, are getting represented fairly in government, have access to the same rights as others. And now their homes are being raided, they're being terrorized by our state government. This is not a new thing, although we had hoped that we were past it. You go back into some of your history books from just not so long ago, and you can read about crosses being burned in people's yards. You can read about people being shot with water hoses. You can read about people being assassinated or their homes bombed, simply because they were fighting for equality, they were fighting for justice, they were fighting for the rights of those around them. And some of that same stuff, although it's not showing up on the front page of the paper or on your Twitter feed as much as you might hope, it's still happening. And so we need to proceed with the same vigilance, the same understanding that we have this power, that it can't be taken away from us, and that we have not only the privilege, but the obligation to use it. And again, I'm serving in office for a couple of reasons. One, because I truly love the city I was born in, the county I was born in, and I want to have an impact. I also have a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. And again, I want to do things that are going to make their lives better, that are going to make Houston a place where they can grow up in and be proud of. But But I'm also in this position because, again, I believe in the concept of American democracy. And so I'm going to commit myself for the rest of my life to fight for the America that we know and love to continue to get better. And I'm asking you all to do the same. At the end of our constitutional convention, one of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, was asked, what kind of system of government do we have? And what he said was, a republic, if we can keep it. And so it's going to be on you to determine if we're going to keep it. And I want y'all to take that very seriously. I'm with you. I'm honored to stand alongside each and every one of you in the fight to protect and preserve democracy. And I thank you for all that you're going to do. God bless you. Now, Samuel, Michaela, I don't know if I'm allowed to take questions or what are we doing about? Go for it. All right. I think I saw one here.
My name is Rafael. I have a daughter. She's 20 years old. Last year, she went with a friend to vote, and she didn't have no driver's license. She got that expired up, and she went. And then I realized she already left with her friend to vote. And then she come back, she said that she already voted. We accepted, but Republic and democracy. The Republic was checking that expired it is okay or not to register with the passport. Finally, she did. Now, I want to ask a question, if she can change her mind. For example, she registered for democracy. Now she wants to support Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her you're gonna be a red dog, right? Something like that. But I don't know if she can change. I would like to know if she can change her.
Sure. So the question that I'm hearing, and I thank you for asking, is if you voted for one party in the past, can you vote for another one in the future?
Yes.
The short answer is yes. Especially on the general election ballot, everyone has the opportunity to vote, and you can vote for whomever you want to, regardless of who you voted for in the past. In primary elections, it's a little bit different. So in March of this year, there was a primary election, and you had to choose, do I want to vote in the Republican primary, or do I vote in the Democratic primary? And once you voted, if there was a runoff for that same election, you couldn't vote in the Republican primary and then the Democratic runoff, or vice versa. So it can be a little tricky. But this fall, 7 weeks from today, or even in early voting, your daughter should go and vote. She should exercise her right. She should take photo ID. It's another thing I didn't mention. You need a driver's license. You can also use a gun license. You cannot use your college ID. Again, they don't want young people to vote. You cannot use your college ID, but you can use a passport, and there are 3 or 4 other types of valid state accepted photo ID. You have to have that to vote. And it doesn't matter if you didn't vote in the primary. It doesn't matter if you voted for one party and now you've changed your mind. You can vote, you can exercise your right, and you can make your voice heard. Thank you for that question. Yes, ma'am.
How many current participants are running for president? Like, do you have like an estimated number?
That's also a complicated question because candidates for the question was how many candidates are there for president? I'll give you the complicated answer and I'll give you the simple answer. The complicated answer is candidates have to get on each statewide ballot, and there are different rules for how you get on that ballot. And so the Texas ballot may look a little bit different from Louisiana, may look a little bit different from Colorado, and so forth. But here's what I'm going to tell you. You only have 2 choices for who's going to be the next president of the United States. And you can vote for anybody on that ballot. If you vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, one of them is going to be the next president of the United States. If you vote for one of those other folks, which you're free to do, that vote's not going to be worth very much. And so I encourage y'all to think seriously about that choice. Because oftentimes, and I see it all the time, folks say, hey, I think this candidate is insane, and I think this other candidate is like not really my cup of tea, and so I'm gonna not vote at all, right? What I'm telling you today is that if you choose to not vote at all, you're pretty much voting for the insane person. And similarly, if you vote for one of these candidates that does not have a chance, that will not win a single electoral college vote, has 0% odds of becoming the next president of the United States, you're also throwing away that voice. And so some of these, look, life is tough, right? No candidate's gonna be perfect. Even though I think I'm great, I'm not perfect. And there are reasons why you might disagree with me and might not vote for me. But when you go in, you gotta understand, and this is not just for president, this is for US Senate, this is for judge, this is for all these different races. One of these candidates is going to win. I owe it to myself, I owe it to my family, I owe it to my community to inform myself about which one of them most aligns with my morals, with what I want to see done in the future, and then use my voice to choose that person. Because if you don't vote, if you say I'm going to skip this one, you're voting for the one you least agree with, right? Because you're taking power away, from that direction. And so do the homework, make the tough choice, even if you got to hold your nose, and vote for the one, again, that aligns most with what you want to see in the world.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm here all day. Y'all have to pick me up. One back here. Doc, just tell me when I gotta say the last question.
So when you're asking, or when you mentioned that the Attorney General's blocking the amount of ways that basically people are allowed to vote, wouldn't that be considered kind of unconstitutional, or is that kind of just a legal loophole?
You would think. So going back to the 1960s, the Voting Rights Act was passed under President Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was a Texan. And Democrats and Republicans alike came together to vote to pass the Voting Rights Act that upheld these rights. Fast forward many, many years, I can name every single president all the way down the line, Republican and Democrat alike, George Bush 1, Bill Clinton, George Bush 2, Barack Obama. Under all those presidents, the Voting Rights Act was renewed year after year after year, until Donald Trump became president. And many aspects of the Voting Rights Act no longer exist. They're not guaranteed. And then so state law, federal law does no longer exist in this particular area. State law overcomes, and under our state laws, the law is whatever the people in power say it is. And so when you have a governor, a lieutenant governor, or an attorney general, a state senate, and a state house of representatives that are all controlled by one party, the law is whatever those people say the law is. And so while I disagree, while I would, in my mind, say that the concept of the Constitution that's in your hands is being violated, that's not what state law says. In fact, drive-through voting, which we executed very nearly perfectly in 2020, to where it was excellent. People loved it. People wanted to see it again. Today, drive-through voting is illegal because in 2021, the next legislative session after that election, our state actors got together and said, nope, we're crossing it off. 24-hour voting is now illegal in the state of Texas because those who we put in power, either through exercising our voice or not using our voice, are changing the laws to make it harder to vote. Sending vote-by-mail applications to seniors is now illegal if done. In fact, it's a felony. If your county clerk were to do it today, your county clerk would go to prison. That is state law, written by state legislators that you put in office either because you voted for them or because you didn't vote for their opponents. And so that's how important this is. The right to vote itself is on the ballot, and so many other of our rights, our environmental rights, our economic rights, our rights to do what we want to do with our own bodies, our right to marry the people that we want to marry, all those things are on the ballot this election. All right, I'll make these two the last two.
So you was talking about like how it's easier to vote, but like I feel like one of the main problems is also like to educate yourself about who you're voting for. And how do you find that? Because there's some website that really like sugarcoat some, presidents or attorneys.
Sure.
I'm just trying to like figure out like how would you like, I don't know, educate yourself about who you're voting for
Yeah.
and see what like bad things.
Yeah, I mean, and again, Harris County, when you go to vote this fall, you're gonna see nearly 100 different elections. That means nearly 200 different candidates. And it's a huge, lift to figure out what all is going on there. I mentioned one potential solution, which is the League of Women Voters. Again, they're nonpartisan. They don't have any bent of we're conservative, we're progressive. They just want people to vote. And so League of Women Voters Houston will look at your ballot for you. You tell them kind of where you live, and they'll say, here are all your candidate choices, and here's what they say about themselves. And so you can take the time to read about each candidate. These are also partisan elections, right? Now, some people vote straight down the line for their political party, some do not. But the party is a good guideline about what these people stand for. Because normally, if you're part of a political party, you agree with their party platform. And so that's a decent indicator in partisan races. And then another one is that you can look around to organizations that you trust. So I mentioned LULAC, right? The fights for Hispanic rights. Sometimes LULAC will endorse candidates. And so if you're someone who says, I am pro-Hispanic civil rights, then you might go and look at LULAC's endorsed candidates and say, I'm with them. And there are so many others. There are environmental organizations. Again, think about the issues that you care most about. Find the organization that's deeply committed to preserving that right or fighting. But then some people care about, bike lanes in the city of Houston, right? And there's an organization called Bike Houston, and members of Bike Houston tend to support these candidates that are all about bike lanes. You might not care at all about bike lanes. So you go to someone looking for, the organization that focuses on affordable housing, right? Some people care about gun rights. There are so many different issues that you might say are the ones that are most important to you. I would think about what that issue is, look at the organizations that are focused on preserving that, and then look at which candidates they endorse. So that's, it's a shortcut, but again, knowing that it can be very, very difficult to educate yourself on a very long, very detailed ballot, those are some things that you can do. But the most straightforward one I always point to, League of Women Voters, look at what the candidates say about themselves and say, do I want to see a person who believes that in office, or do I want to see the other person?
So among our generation, and in comparison to the age of most like Congress, for example, most of the elected representatives are significantly older than our age demographic. And do you have any suggestions for how we could see more people of our age demographic actually get into office, for those they're at least eligible for?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is running, right? You have to have the boldness to put your name on the ballot. But to make give you higher odds of success, you can't just snap your fingers one day and say, hey, I want to run for office, right? You want to get involved today, right? So again, start to look at the local political parties. If you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, what are the local Democrat or Republican clubs or organizations that I can go be a member of? Can I take a leadership role? I can be the secretary or the treasurer or the vice president, build relationships with these people. And through your track record in kind of community or grassroots leadership, people can say, hey, I want to see that person do more in the future. I want to get behind them. And start to get your name out there. Again, also invest in other candidates. So you see folks running for office, you go help them, and then by helping them, you're now interacting with all the other people who believe in that same person, so they probably agree with a lot of the things that you agree with. And many of them can be people who write you a check or who volunteer for you or become part of your campaign staff in the future. And so again, it's just looking for ways at the most basic level to involve yourself, to take a leadership role. But also, again, when you're educating yourself on who's running, you can see how old they are. And I don't vote just on age, but I definitely use age as a tiebreaker. If I say, hey, I'm struggling with these two, I'm gonna go with the younger one every time. Because I know, again, that those people care about some of the same things that I'm thinking about, that they're gonna be here with me 20 years from now to deal with the results of these changes that they make. And so I certainly use age as a tiebreaker. Again, it's an honor to be here with y'all today. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your passion and your commitment to preserving this America that we have. And again, thank y'all for having me as your keynote.
Leave the sign-in sheet. If you have the sign-in sheets, please leave them with me. If you didn't get on one, come see me.